and welcome to the Loudcast with me, your host, Katie Ailes. I am still not Kevin McLean. You guys will notice that your regular host, Kev, is not present this week. Unfortunately, he is feeling poorly. We spent all of last week with our 3-year-old nephew, and the kid has germs. So many germs. So I have taken over the hosting seat this week, and I am so excited for the episode that we have for you guys today. We have a tremendous guest, the absolute legend of the Scottish literary scene, Kevin Williamson. So I'm very much looking forward to our chat later on. But before that, we have some fantastic poems for you guys. Please do remember, if you are enjoying the Loudcast, you can see all of the episodes on our channel. You can also listen back through them if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any podcast platform. If you are enjoying the show, please do consider giving us a like, subscribing to the channel, rating it, reviewing it, following it, all of those good things, because when Kevin is poorly, nothing cheers him up more than good old analytics. But with all of that aside, I am so excited for the poems that we have to share with you guys on this episode of the Loudcast. Our very first poem was recorded at a Loud Poets show, I think a couple of years ago now, and it is by the tremendous Janette Ayachi. Jeanette is just such a fantastic poet and performer of poetry. Her book, Hand Over Mouth Music, won the Saltire Poetry Book of the Year award in 2019. And she has this incredible performance style. This piece is entitled The Black Tapestry of Amy Winehouse. It's hard to realize, but I think we're nearing a decade since Amy Winehouse passed, and I think this is such a powerful way of remembering the amazing artist that Amy Winehouse was. So please enjoy Janette Ayachi, The Black Tapestry of Amy Winehouse.
It's called The Black Tapestry of Amy Winehouse. Ancestry, tarot-marked by jazz, upholstered with narcotics as she evolved past the spinning wheel as managers tried to customize her patchwork. No rehab for the dolls made from the glory of small gods and gold queens. She scaled Billboard music charts the way hot mercury shoots up glass. 1 million copies sold in one esoteric summer of weight loss and mood swings. A rag doll with buttons for eyes, her stitched-on mouth gaping an alembic tunnel of deep contralto. Just a Jewish girl singing along to old records in her lost room. Hypothermia under the sheets. Librium and fame just wasn't enough to save her from the police arrests, needlepoint coma, and the curse of irregular heartbeats. That morning in July, her bodyguard found her in bed. Cotton, stuffing spilled from limbs, scraps of notations and empty vodka bottles, her sewed-on smile, the only thing intact. Lips blue like willow pattern bone china dipped in purple haze, her voodoo twin up late mixing potions into an almanac of addictions, a spinneret of stark ritual, elbow deep in candlelight and relic. Self-harm scars sutured across corners, moon slit at the seams. Pulse snagged, lungs unzipped, heart ink poisoned by a toxic red felt tip, as flammable as petrol, cremated to tribute as prayers emitted from floods of fan mail, and the basic grammar of conjugated stars spoofed into tabloid personas. Now, angels, as giddy as schoolgirls, hover around her head like bees, weaving braids into her hive of wool, sharing the pillow with her dreams. I am not afraid, but the guilt will kill me if you jump first.
And that was Janette Ayachi with The Black Tapestry of Amy Winehouse. I'm always blown away by Jeanette's ability to weave stories and just such detailed, descriptive, and gorgeously eloquent poetry. What an amazing writer. So please, we've linked, as always, to her website and links to her work below. Please do check out the rest of her poetry because she is such an incredible writer. Our next poem that we are featuring on the Loudcast this time is actually one of mine. So this is an older poem that I wrote, I think 5 years ago now, when I was up in St. Andrews for Stanza, Scotland's incredible international poetry festival in St. Andrews. And about visiting the beach there. And we recently put out a cinepoem for it. The amazing Mark Galley edited it together for me with music. And I'm very fond of this video. For some reason, it's been doing well in the analytics, and I don't know whether that has anything to do with the title of the poem. So I'll leave you to decide, dear viewers. This is my poem, Striptease. Each time I visit St. Andrews, I spend at least an hour on the beach at East Sands, watching the waves zipping sea and shore together along their foamy seam, then unzipping, just as quick, then zipping again and again, just to remind myself that the moon is a horny woman too, who knew the art of the tease long before we did, whose tides rise up to lap the salty thighs of the beach so slow, who knows the exact moment to pull back, retracting wave by wave, grain by grain, leaving the sand to dry and crack and await her return. And so she lures. And that was me with Striptease, a poem about the ocean and tides, just about the ocean and tides. I unfortunately have not learned any fabulous burlesque skills, although mad props to those who can do that. One day I would love to open a burlesque poetry night, but today is not that day. In any case, moving swiftly along, our third video for you guys today is by the amazing Leo Glaister. If you haven't ever seen Leo perform live, as soon as you're able to, please do get to a gig where he is featuring. He is one of the most innovative, dynamic, experimental, and just fantastic poets on the Scottish spoken word scene. And I think a lesser known poet, which is a real bummer because he just brings such incredible talent and enthusiasm to his work. So you know what? I'm not going to give very much of an introduction to this poem because I want it to speak for itself. This is the amazing Leo Glaister with Batman Forever.
Right, boys and girls, it's imagination time. Cast your mind to a city, a grim city, a dank, undesirable, frightening sin city with a corrupt local government, a wealth distribution that would embarrass Tsar Alexander III, and a complete lack of any public amenities whatsoever, and bad weather. You're there? Good. Now, lose your job, apply for a loan, get in debt, lose your home, ask for help, find none, arrive at a crossroads, make a decision, commit a crime. Shoplifting or mugging or something. It's not very important. And don't worry, don't fret, don't lose any sleep. You won't have to worry about the cop coming to chase you up on their beat. They're all too busy being rushed off their feet or putting them up. It's sometimes hard to tell which one, but fortunately, there is someone who's willing to fight the good fight, to take the mantle up, and to show the people of Gotham that their city doesn't belong to criminals and the corrupt. he might not tell you that the city does belong to the billionaire playboy CEOs of multinational corporations who drain the hearts, minds, and bodies of Gotham's blue-collar workforce to manufacture and distribute military hardware whilst organising flamboyant figurehead fundraisers themselves funded presumably by corporate tax cuts, all the while safe in the knowledge that the Dark Knight is striking fear into the heart of a criminal underworld composed entirely of ethnic minorities and pulverising nefarious supervillains drawn for the ranks of the frustrated intelligentsia and suppressed free thinkers. Does he really have us fooled? Has he really pulled the cowl over our eyes? But wait, that's not all. No, there's more to him still. Yes, fear not, vicious Crim, for this bat never kills. No, he so values your life that he will hand you over for a fair trial in a criminal justice system that still enforces the death penalty. Although, come to think of it, I reckon I do know a couple of people who'd think it a treat to find a knight who'll condemn violence in the street and protect the well-to-do from harassment and pain. Neoconservatism, thy name is Bruce Wayne. So, look out, beware, new movie to renter. No box is too late for this high-tech tormentor. And stay in your homes, occasional weed toker. This cat with the ears is a complete fucking joker. Yes, it's vigilante first, ask questions never. No social justice, just Batman. Forever. Thank you.
And that was Leo Glaister with Batman Forever. What a tremendous, bizarre, and I would argue quite important poem. If you want to see more from Leo, we do have other poems by him on this channel, and please do follow his work. He's based in Glasgow and such a tremendous poet. But for today's Loudcast, we have another fantastic poet and a legend of the Scottish literary scene to talk to. I am so excited to have this guest on today. He has been a huge part of the Scottish publishing scene, the Scottish live literary scene, has done so much work building platforms for others, as well as sharing his own poetry. He currently works with Michael Peterson on Reekie, which celebrated their 10th anniversary last year, as well as co-founding the new poetry festival, Push the Boat Out. So there are so many things for us to discuss. Please welcome to the Loudcast, Kevin Williamson. Kev, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kate. That was quite a build-up. Hope I can live up to that one.
I mean, you've just done so many tremendous things for this scene. So yeah, as I said, big honor to talk to you. How have you been doing over the past 16 months, if that's not too dangerous a question?
How do you answer that, really? Ups and downs, keeping productive, looking after kids, feeling that the world's crashing in, and then suddenly feeling its resurgence and going back and forth, and wonder what's going to happen next, wonder if you're ever going to perform again, then thinking it's okay and then not. And that's just maybe a 2% of it. Yeah.
It's what a bizarre year it's been. I do always sort of feel bad asking that question. There is, I hope, some hope on the horizon, some light. I think hopefully later in our chat we'll get to some of the other projects that you and Michael and the rest of the Reekie team have been getting up to throughout lockdown and penciled into the calendar. But before we get to all of that, I just wanted to chat with you a little bit about Leo Glaister's poem that we just heard. What did you think of Batman Forever?
Oh, anything that takes down Batman's okay with me. Team Marvel all the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Go right back to my childhood.
Yes, yeah, we do love Marvel on the Loudcast. I've been rewatching all of the MCU lately. I think, one of the brilliant things I was thinking about with this poem is how it uses pop culture to make political statements, which I think can be kind of rare sometimes in the spoken word scene. I don't know if that's something that you've seen frequently or maybe isn't quite as common.
It's mixed. I mean, it comes up. I mean, there's plenty. I mean, poetry is always drawn from pop culture, I think, in the poetry scene. And it's how you do it, and I think Leo does it really well. You know, he mixes the politics and the pop culture nicely for a really good takedown. You know, I mean, I spent just before the pandemic started, I spent an entire month watching the entire series. I think it's 100 episodes of Gotham, and I want that month back. I want that month back. Like, literally in a month, I just gorged on it. So yeah, at the end of it, I hated Batman. So yeah, it was good.
It's
I like
always
all the
nice-
bad guys. Always the bad guys.
I mean, villains are so much more interesting, aren't they? Yeah, I think it's that special thing that poetry can do is providing that alternate perspective, isn't it? And taking a show where you're supposed to root for one guy and going, nah, let's provide some alternate context so that that's not what you're focusing on.
No, and in literature as well, I prefer anti-heroes, flawed anti-heroes. You know, people who are not flawed to make themselves look good because of their flaws, but they're just flawed. And I've always preferred that kind of literature. I'm not really a big fan of uplifting, inspiring literature, which probably says a lot about me. But we reach for what we reach for.
No, and I mean there's something to be said about, if all that you relate to is perfect people, well then that's your experience. But I think a lot of us don't relate to that. Humans are flawed, and so we want to read stories about flawed people. So yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that some of the points that Leo's making there are brilliant. I love as well the style that he's using. I think one of the things we've talked about on the Loudcast before is sort of different regional styles around Scotland in the spoken word scene, which I think arguably is sort of hard to define because so many people are getting inspiration from the internet nowadays, right? How do we tell what's local and what's global? But I feel like that really rapid pace delivery is something that's really come out of Glasgow. I don't know if that's something that you've noticed as well.
I like the way that Leo paced it. I like the way, in fact, he did change. I like poems that change pace halfway through or part of the way through and then slow down and go fast, So it's not just a mono delivery. So yeah, I like the way he did that, yeah.
100%. Oh, well, yeah, please. Yeah. As I was saying before, viewers, please do check out the rest of Leo's work. He is an absolutely tremendous poet. And I think as well, the reason why I wanted to start our conversation by bringing up this poem is first of all, it's tremendous, but you are someone who has such an incredible perspective on the Scottish literary scene through your experience, publishing poets and providing platforms for poets through live events and various other things. And I was reading actually something that you posted online on the Push the Boat Out website, and we'll get to chatting about that festival later. But you were saying that you spent all of 2019 reading, I think you said more than 500 poetry pamphlets and collections. Is that right? Is that an experience that you went through?
Yeah, I constructed a project in my head on the last week of 2018 where I would reprint, if you can call it that, on Twitter, a poem by a different poet every day. For 365 days, and I set myself some challenges to make it really harder than it was, like none from anthologies. So they all had to come from actual collections, because I love poetry the way it's presented in a collection rather than a greatest hits or an anthology, which I read a lot as well when I'm dipping into them. So I actually had to go to the original collections, go through them all, find the one I like, and then I set myself a goal of not publishing any poems that had been in the major anthologies, like the Blood Axe Staying Alive, Being Alive trilogy, some of the big Scottish anthologies, the Norton Book of Poetry. So that negated all the popular poems everybody knows. So it got harder and harder. I kept creating these things where obviously, had a gender balanced. I changed it each day. So that there was, it wasn't just a male or just a female perspective. So I kept setting these tasks to make it harder and harder. And it took over my life for an entire year. Just read loads, and I was never out of the Scottish Poetry Library, which I couldn't have done the project without them. Couldn't have done it this year.
No.
I know Chris Cregan's taken it over. I don't know, he's been doing it over 2020, but he didn't have access to the Scottish Poetry Library, so I think that's why he had to use a lot of anthologies and poetry around him, because it was much harder without the SPL, which is the greatest asset to poetry in Scotland, I think.
Yeah. No, hugely important, because I was going to say at first, I'd love to see your home library if you're reading that much, but absolutely, yeah, having the SPL there, and I believe they're now open again on a limited capacity, which is fantastic. Yeah.
I bought a lot of poetry books, a lot. you know, a mountain of poetry books, and I'm so glad I've got a lot of poetry surrounding me, and I love being surrounded by poetry books wherever I go, whether
It is
it's
the best
my
feeling.
bedroom, whether it's through the kitchen or the toilet or bathroom, wherever. I like poetry books to be there.
I wanted to ask as well, because one of the things that you said on the Push the Boat Out website is that through that project you sort of observed evolutions and shifts in poetry over the past 20 odd years, and I know that this is a massive and broad question, but yeah, I was wondering whether you could speak to that sort of specifically in the Scottish scene, whether there are trends that you've seen evolving, whether they're stylistic or political or whatever the case may be. Did anything really strike you that you noticed through this project?
Yes, there was one or two things that didn't come straight away. I had a theory halfway through before the project, that there was a rupture took place in Britain, in Europe, worldwide, and it affected poetry really, really fast. And it took place with the economic collapse in 2008, 2009. So I went back to the Scottish Poetry Library and started looking through all the anthologies of poetry from about 2006, 2007, 2008 to see if there was a different type of poetry being published then from the anthologies now. And I discovered that there was. There was much more introspective poetry around about, and you can go back, have a look through the Forward Poetry Prize collections from 2000, 2006, 2007, and compare them what people are consuming now as poetry. There's been a revolution and a transformation, in my opinion, in the form, in the structure, in the way poetry is being both received and promoted, but in the poetry itself and its the content. So I do believe there's a revolution taking place since 2008, 2009. One of the things I was thinking back to is when I did an early event in Glasgow, and Billy Letford was there. This must be about 2009. Kirsten Innes, Alan Bissett, and a few others, Maggie Gibson, they were all involved in promoting this poetry night in the CCA. And Billy Letford got up, and he had memorised all his words. I think it was a short story, and I was like, wow, you've memorised all your words, Billy. And he was pretty unknown at then, unpublished, and I thought, right, I'm going to start memorising some poems now, because I've always read them from the page. I thought, it looks so good, but that was not the norm back then. It wasn't the norm. People read from poetry. Very few people performed it. You had your big name performers. And then what happened was there was an emergence around about, we started now Reekie in 2011, which coincided. That was like Michael Peterson. He was memorising his poems. We were just at the infancy of trying to memorise our poems to try and make it look better. And then other people were memorising. And I felt there was a change took place. And that's when you got the big hitters of the new performance poetry started coming through. The slam poets of the past had always done that, but they seemed kind of separate from what we were doing. They seemed more New York based, London based, and so there was a transformation. I think Scottish poetry scene absorbed all of these different things consciously and subconsciously, and a different type of scene has emerged, a really good scene, a scene that I really like.
Oh my gosh, there's so much I want to follow up on there. Yeah, just to recommend to viewers, William Letford, tremendous poet. And I remember, Kev, the first time I saw him, and he was performing totally off the page. I think his whole set was just from memory. I think it was at the Mitchell Library in Glasgow, and just my mind was blown. I think as well, because when I saw him, it would have been, I think back in 2012, it was quite early as well. And I'd never heard poetry in Scots before, and in fully unapologetic Scots about, contemporary issues, about him being a roofer, about sex, about all these different things. And what an incredible poet. I think as well, it's such an interesting point about spoken word and slam poetry being around, since the 80s in the US, but being more associated with sort of American style spoken word poetry. And so, yeah, could you talk more about sort of the emergence of Scottish spoken word and what that's like, and maybe speak a bit about Neu Reekie and how you guys work to promote that? Yeah.
There's never been a period when Scots poetry wasn't quite dominant. within the poetry scene in Scotland. I mean, you can go back to whenever you want, whether it's the period of Mackers in the 50s and 60s, or you can go right back to Burns. And through the 60s, 70s, 80s. I know when I was doing Rebel Inc. in the night, I really started in the arts and in the early 90s with Rebel Inc. And we did a lot of live nights, and there was a lot of work in Scots, she's gone now, Sandy Craigie, bless her, but she was just one of the greatest performers of her poetry in Scots, in a very Edinburgh. She lived in the old town. It was a very old town Edinburgh, rather than it's a cross between modern Scots and an old Edinburgh. I loved that, her voice and her accent and the way she spoke and the way she delivered. So that was back in the early 90s. But then, she was drawn from Tom Leonard, and there's a whole history of Scots poetry in Scots. I just don't think anybody really called themselves performance poets then. I think that was the kind of difference, is you performed your poetry if you felt like performing your poetry. Jim Ferguson was another writer back then. Rodney Relax. They were all performing and writing in Scots back in the 90s, and I liked working with a lot of these people. So there's a continuity.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's really interesting, because one of the things that I often came up, not came up against, but a phrase that I kept encountering when I was sort of researching spoken word in Scotland was this idea that, Scotland has the bardic tradition, and we're a nation of storytellers and poets, which I think is absolutely true. But I'm always so curious about sort of, the local versus the global, and how much sort of the term performance poetry and the term spoken word are maybe imports from the States, when and those sort of influences have merged with what was already here, as you say, with Burns and sort of Scots performed poetry rather than perhaps quote unquote performance poetry. It's fascinating. I wanted to ask, just for Loudcast viewers who maybe aren't familiar with Neu Reekie. I mean, first of all, be familiar with Neu Reekie. They are amazing. But if you could just sort of, talk about what it is that you guys do within the scene, because you are so multidisciplinary, and you work with artists and musicians and spoken word poets and quote unquote page poets. I hate that term, but poets of all stripes and artists of all stripes. So if you wouldn't mind just sort of introducing Neu Reekie to folks who aren't aware of what you guys do.
They're showcases. They're a mishmash of different arts, as you say. Poetry's at the centre of it. We don't put on very many. We only put on 2 poets, generally speaking, for about 10 to 15 minutes, and that's it. They become the show's built around those 2 poets. We have music, we have film and animation, we have dance, we have performance art, we have all sorts of weird and wonderful things can happen round about that. So it's an unexpected that we try to approach it. I'm going to sound very pretentious here, but this is how I think of myself, quite pretentiously, as a conceptual artist rather than as an organizer or a curator. I try to conceptualize events that start from the moment the doors open and finish when the people leave. And that's not just what's on stage, but everything that's around it. We try to concept, and I think that's what kind of sets Neu Reekie apart from. It's just our approach to that way of doing it has been quite differently. Myself and Michael, we bounce ideas around. What about we throw this in? Sometimes we just want to throw everything at it, and they can be quite. You don't know what's coming next. You don't know what we're going to put on that screen. You don't know what's going to happen on the stage. We try to avoid being formulaic, and we include hip hop in poetry as well as. I don't actually like the word performance poetry, and I'm not comfortable with spoken word. I feel there's too many grey areas, But we try and mix it all up, all the different styles. It's not going to be page poets or performance poets or hip hop. It's going to be a mixture, and people who work with dancers, people who work with artists, people who work with music. So we're just trying to push the form and keep it. And we've taken it all over the world. We've taken it to Japan, New York, New Zealand, Malawi, Barcelona, Dublin. We've had quite a good run at it to try and show what we can do in Scotland. So. I don't know if that's a good summary, but it's just the summary is a mishmash, just like the actual events themselves.
I think that's brilliant though, having that approach to it of, it's not about saying, okay, this is our spoken word person, this is our page poet, because I agree with you. I mean, a lot of those labels they're not complete, and they don't cover someone's practice, and arguably they shouldn't. I know in my own practice I really value flitting between the boundaries and incorporating dance into my poetry and doing all of that stuff, and I think the more that we can do that and showcase that and show that there are more options, the better it can be. I wanted to very quickly ask you about a project that you guys did back in 2015, and we'll get to current stuff in a moment. But one of the projects that Reekie put out that I loved was your Anywhere But the Cities tour. And I think that particularly as we're coming out of lockdown, I wanted to ask you about this, because this was a tour that you guys did, which, is what it says on the tin, right? You did a tour all over Scotland where you visited anywhere but the cities, and you really took your sort of eclectic showcases to different places. And so I wanted to ask you about that tour, but also if there's anything that you learned from it in terms of really bringing performance and poetry and music and all of that to places that don't often have as great access to it as we do in the Central Belt. If there's anything that maybe we can take from that as night curators to reach those people. Yeah.
Well, you got to remember, I'm not a city guy. I'm from Thurso in the far north of the Highlands. That's where I was born in Orkney. So I'm not a city guy going to the Highlands. I'm a Highland guy going back to the Highlands because I know these places and I know the people and I love them, and I like the fact that they're so enthusiastic to embrace different things, because we got some really good. We did 17 different towns and villages across Scotland, and one of them was actually a cave, Smoo Cave up in Sutherlandshire near Cape Wrath, and we moved it around, and it became this travelling juggernaut. And one of the things we tried to do in all the places was not just to come with what we did, but to do our research to find out what local talent there was that we can bring onto the stage or help us in involvement. So it became a mixture of what we do, who we're bringing, but also what's there locally, because I'm a wee bit wary of just sort of dumping culture on people from afar. As a tour, it's almost like we've got all the good stuff in the city and here we come with it to liberate your minds. But in actual fact, there was some amazing stuff, amazing artists. We worked with musicians, poets, filmmakers, and it's a thing we're continuing. Like one of our next gigs is in August, Fringe by the Shore in North Berwick, and we'll do our thing. But we're working with local filmmakers there, so that the film side of it and the visual side of it isn't going to be just us. It's going to come from local people. Some local kids in North Berwick are going to help us put this together as well. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, 100%. And I know that you guys have, as you said, done gigs all over the world. You did a big show in Hull back in 2017, and I agree. It's really important that you're not just, as you say, dumping culture on people, but that you come to listen as well as to speak.
Absolutely. I mean, even when we did it in Hull, we wanted to bring to Hull, City of Culture, all the troublemakers we could find, really. It's just like, I mean, we're talking like people might not say Charlotte Church or Young Fathers or Mark Cousins, but these people are outsiders. They're doing outsider art in their own way. And in amongst that, we did a hip-hop night, which Akala headlined, and Dave Hook from Solar Eye helped organise. But what we did was we worked with the Hull hip-hop scene, and there was like workshops with local youth in the schemes of Hull, and we brought a lot of that and some of the young teams dancing. So there was a big event that involved, that was self-organised by the people in Hull. They provided the dance-off teams, and they provided some of the hip-hop artists as well, and we worked with some of the local rappers there. So that side of it is important. It's really important, because there's so much talent that doesn't really get a chance. And to be fair, now, Reekie, because we only do 2 poets at our normal events, we don't really act as a place where we break people who've not been published or that, but sometimes we do, so it's really good to get out and about and do bigger things where we can just really get a lot of local people involved as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's such important work. One more thing I wanted to ask you about in terms of Reekie before we move on to, I definitely want to ask you about Push the Boat Out, which is your new endeavor, a really exciting project. But just sort of speaking about younger people and about giving them an opportunity to emerge. I know that's such a weird word, but to get sort of skills and training and sort of find their footing in the live literary scene. One of the things that I know Noirikie's been involved in is the BBC One Extra Words First initiative. And I know that the deadline for that was, unfortunately, that's already passed. So if you guys are watching this or listening to this, unfortunately, not for this year, but definitely do check it out for next year. But yeah, Kevin, could you just quickly explain what that sort of scheme is about and how, if, any viewers or listeners of this show are interested, how they might be able to get involved and get some support through it?
We're just looking for people under 30 to send a clip, or we were looking for it. They're all in. We've got about, I think there's about 260 submissions that come in.
Gosh.
Not all from Scotland, obviously. Like, this is across the different regions in England as well. So what we'll do is we'll watch all 250, 260 of them, and we'll try and create a group of writers that we can work with here in Scotland, like we've done for the last 2 years, and we'll help just develop their talents. And some of them will go through to a showcase final. Although the final's it's a nice thing to go through to, but we're just really looking at some of the talent that's coming through and helping them on their way a little bit. It's been really good. We've had some really good people through so far. And we published a wee booklet of some of their stuff, just independent of BBC Words First, so they've got something to remember that process by. So it's something that they do every year. I think it's a really good project, BBC Words First. It gives you a chance to, all you've got to do is just record it on your mobile phone to your face and send it, and we can work out from there whether there's something or not. So yeah, that process is ongoing just now. We're going through all this stuff at the moment.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I think it's one of the things we've talked about on the show before is how to not just get people interested in the scene, but then how to, give them some support and help them stay engaged. And I think, especially in this past year, it's been tough because, often people feel like they're losing the connections that you might make at an open mic or at a gig and maybe not knowing where to turn for mentorship. So I'm really grateful to you guys for doing that work and for all of the other, as you say, it's not just Noirikie, it's not just Scotland, it's organizations all across the UK. So yeah, unfortunately, deadline passed for this year, but guys, please do check that out for next year and future years if you are under 30. But yeah, before we sort of run out of time to talk about this, I'm really interested and curious about your new project. You and part of a broader team, the new project Push the Boat Out, which is a brand new poetry festival for Edinburgh. I know that you co-founded this with Jenny Niven, and I'm just wondering if you could, speak about the motivations behind setting up a new poetry festival and specifically for the Loudcast, since we're focused on spoken word, how sort of live literature and live poetry will be featured in that. Yeah.
I'm really, really excited about this one. It's coming in October, 15th, 16th, 17th of October. The festival will be at Summer Hall. It was the idea for an Edinburgh Poetry Festival came to me while I was doing that project of the 365 poems in 2019. And I started thinking about this, and I chatted with a few people, with Ali at the Poetry Live, and it was an idea that wasn't ready yet to run. And then it was when I met with Jenny Niven, she really took the idea seriously, thought this is brilliant, and then that was when we came up with the idea of Push the Boat Out. And the two of us have taken that idea and we've built a good team of people round about us. Jenny is directing the festival, and it's going to be something really special. I think it's going to be something that we want people's jaws to drop when they see what we've got lined up. That's the incentive. And I think people's jaws will drop. I'm hoping they'll drop anyway. Because I think we've got something very special for Edinburgh. And it's outside that festival thing of August. It's something that's 6 months away from Stanza, so it kind of bookends. That's the only two real poetry festivals Scotland will have is Stanza and Push the Boat Out. Like big international type poetry festivals. I think it's nice to bookend each part of the year, spring and autumn, with two festivals.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, because I know every March I'm very much looking forward to Stanza as sort of almost the harbinger of spring for me. Go to St. Andrews, get some sea air and visit Stanza, and then this will be a lovely harbinger of autumn, of winter, in a very different way. I'm reluctant to ask this because I know things might be dicey, but obviously planning a festival in October in this sort of climate, I can imagine might be a little bit complicated. So is it, at the moment, is it sort of a hybrid festival plan, or just sort of wait and see what restrictions allow and play it by ear? Is that sort of the approach?
It's not going to be a hybrid festival. It's not going to, well, sorry, that's not quite true. We are going to do a run-up. I don't want to give away too much. There'll be an aspect of it will be, online.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's going to be for live poets, live audiences, capacity audiences is what we're planning for. Jenny Niven and Asa and some of the people involved, they're very careful. They're looking at all the different options, weighing them up, and it's been really, really difficult because we don't know what sort of audiences. I've kind of got my own kind of crazy mindset, which is like, no, it's going to be okay. We're going to have full capacity audiences. Plan B's. Let's leave Plan B out the window, which is not the way the rest of the people in the team work. So we don't really know. I think we're going to have full audiences. I think we're going to have the full 450 standing at Summer Hall, in the big dissection room. I think we'll have all the spaces. I think we'll have the whole space looking good, and it's going to be a forum for meeting people, for interacting with poetry in so many different ways. Because it's not just going to be audience. It's not just going to be poets' audience. It's going to be something a bit more physical. It's going to be a bit more interactive, if you want to put it that way. There's going to be a lot of elements to it that will be unveiled. Basically, Jenny and myself have just thrown all of our imaginative ideas into a mix to come up with it as, let's do it in ways that poetry festivals don't do it. So yeah. This mad conglomeration, this mix of stuff is going to be unveiled quite soon.
I love your approach to curating this stuff, Kevin. Bring all the troublemakers to Hull and throw a mad mix of live stuff into Summer Hall. Yeah, that sounds amazing. That is exactly what my heart wants after this year. I remember the last gig that I went to at Summer Hall was I brought my parents to see Rachel Sermani when they were over, who is, I know, an artist that you guys have featured, tremendous musician. Oh, brilliant. And I saw her at, I think it was the Burns and Beyond Festival, doing a collaboration with Nadine Aisha Jasset, who, amazing poet. We featured her on this channel and at our gigs. Really, really brilliant musician. But in any case, yeah, can't wait to get back to that energy of Summer Hall. That's absolutely brilliant. And I just wanted to mention as well, because I was having a nosy around the Push the Boat Out website. You guys, obviously the festival's going to be in October, but am I correct that you're already doing podcasts and various other projects as well in the lead up?
Yeah, we're putting out regular mini podcasts where Jenny is introducing someone doing a single poem. They're all under 5 minutes. Some of them are as little as 2 or 3 minutes. They're just basically a poem in your tea break or whatever, and read by poets that we really like, who they may or may not appear in the festival, but they're poets that we like the festival to be associated with their type of work or their specific work. So we've got quite a few of them up. You'll find them all on our website, pushtheboatout.org. And so that's one aspect of it. We put a regular newsletter, and we're doing outreach work in Wester Hailes, and we're working with children. We're working with some kids who are doing a big project out in the west of Edinburgh. We'll see some fruits of that at the festival and before it, hopefully in August, on huge scaffolding behind the Edinburgh International Festival. We've got a space there. So there's some good outreach work being done with the Whale, Western Hills Arts, and so yeah, it's not just about what happens in Summerhall in those 3 days. It's a process, and there will be poetry in the city in ways that are out with Summerhall. All will be revealed soon.
That sounds fantastic. And yeah, I do love that philosophy to festivals, because I think, that's something we've done a lot of work with Stanza, as you mentioned them. And they're another brilliant example of a festival that doesn't just exist for those, 4 to 6 days in March, right? It is about sort of the entire year and showcasing poetry in a variety of ways. And I love that, that you're doing all of that youth outreach, tying back to what we were talking about with Words First. It's so important to not just showcase the prose, but also to equip people of all ages and sort of all education levels and all experience levels to get involved in poetry. I think that's incredibly important. So that's brilliant. And as always, viewer, listener, all of the links to Push the Boat Out and everything else that Kevin is working on, Reekie and all that, are below in the video description. Kev, at this point in the show, I wanted to turn to, obviously we've talked so much about all of the fantastic events that you put on, and to a lesser extent, the publications that you put out through Reekie, and you mentioned Rebel Ink, which is the fantastic publishing publisher that you worked on in the 90s and early 2000s. I'll put a link to some information about that below. A tremendous project. But I wanted to make sure that we also talked a little bit about your own work as a poet. I think so often when you're someone who builds platforms for others, sometimes conversations about your own creative work can get lost in that. So yeah, I wanted to ask, as a starting point, I know that you're someone who is really interested in Burns, and in his work, and I wondered if you could speak a little bit to your experiences with reading Burns and memorizing Burns and performing Burns as a way into your own poetry.
Yeah, the very first poem I tried to memorise after the Billy Letford experience, revelation, was actually a Burns poem called The Tree of Liberty. I read it a few times. I took it over to Dublin with me. Can I name drop somebody?
Yeah, of course.
I have a photograph to prove it. Somehow or other, I ended up in a restaurant with Shane McGowan, and I was learning The Tree of Liberty. It's the first poem, and I thought, there's something about this poem. I think I can do this differently from the way I've heard it. And I had the poem, and he grabbed the poem from me, and he was like, great poem. That was a great poem. I was like, he loved it. I was like, yeah, this is a really good political poem. And that was the point, because that was 2011. I thought, I'm going to do something with Burns, I think, that's never been done before. And as I was doing my research into Burns, I realised that a lot of Burns' Tree of Liberty is quite a controversial poem in many respects in the Burns canon, because there are some people who dispute its authorship, which I don't. I think it is a Burns poem, and there's reasons where I could expand on that, but I'm not going to bother here, because it is a Burns poem. It's one where it's very controversial. If it had come to light, he wrote it the year before he died. It's obviously about the French Revolution, and it revels in the fact that the French monarchy were beheaded,
Wow.
guillotine. He can't, and Burns goes close to the edge with this one. This is not a poem he would have survived incarceration or deportation if it had come to light that he had written it, because that was a period that Scotland was going through. And it turned out there's a whole selection of poems by Burns that he had never put his name to in his lifetime. So I took 12 of those and made a show out of it. I memorised them all. I worked with a filmmaker, Alistair Cook, and we put it on at the Edinburgh Festival, Edinburgh Fringe at the National Library of Scotland in 2012. That was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. It was terrifying, it was nerve-wracking, but it went down a storm, and I really enjoyed performing Burns in a style that people hadn't seen Burns perform before. So I wanted to move it up a gear, and that's when I came across, I thought, right, God, my memory is so bad for poetry. I had to go through it quite methodically to commit it to memory, visualise it. I thought, do I attempt Tam O'Shanter, 224 lines of poetry? I'm never gonna. But eventually, I got through it, and now that's probably what I do most. I perform Tam O'Shanter more than my own stuff these days. Working with dancers, performance artists, musicians, and I love. I performed it in the Burns Cottage in January, during the middle of the pandemic. Like the bed where Burns was born is right next to me, about 3 or 4 feet away. While I'm thinking the ghost, because this is the room where he was terrified by all these tales by his nanny about bogles and cantrips and fairies and all the demons of the night. And this is where he was terrified. This very room that I'm going to perform it in, and it was quite chilling and moving, and all sorts of funny emotions went through my head while I was actually performing it. It was great. I really enjoyed doing that. Some people loved it, some people really hated it. So I quite like splitting an audience on that one. So Burns just he's become a fabric of my poetic journey. My journey through poetry. And I love this politics. I love all the dimensions to him and all the contradictions within him.
That's the thing. He's not an easy. I mean, no historical figure is, are they? An easy idol. As you say, there's so many contradictions, and I always think of Hugh MacDiarmid in terms of when we're thinking about Scottish political poets, and with arguably contradictory and complex nuanced political ideologies, but nonetheless such strong and powerful voices for their beliefs. And what a great way to start to start with memorization with Burns. I'm remembering one of the most surreal experiences of my poetry career was we were asked by the Scottish Government, Ireland, to do a Burns night back in 2019. And we went along and we did the usual address to the haggis and all that. And after we did our sets, the host of the evening introduced this woman to us and said, "Oh, this is Marie Heaney. She loved your performance." Obviously, the wife of the fantastic late Seamus Heaney, and she's wondering if you, I almost fell over, and she's wondering if she asked us, could you read Seamus's A Burl for Burns out for us? And how do you say no to something like that? So it was great. Kevin McLean, our usual host for the show, and I went into a corner and tried to rehearse Standard Happy as quickly as we could, and then came out and performed A Burl for Burns in front of Marie Heaney, and it was tremendous. But yeah, I think obviously Seamus Heaney, being from Northern Ireland, writing in tribute to this fantastic Scottish poet, and I think it's easy to say, okay, what's all the fuss about Burns? Why do we have a day named after him? There are other poets, and obviously that's true. But I think as he's such a brilliant starting point, particularly when we look at the performance traditions of Scotland. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Kevin. That's brilliant. And I love learning more about Scotland's traditions in those ways. And I'm wondering now, if you could talk a little bit about your own poetry and maybe share a poem for us. How has lockdown been for your creative writing? Because I know for many of us, myself included, it's been very, very hard to be creative over this past year. Has that been your experience, or?
I've tried. I've written a lot of fragmented pieces. I've been working on a film script, and which has started filming already in real time. I've worked on a series of prose poems, one of which was in the Common Breath book, The Middle of a Sentence, that are kind of inspired by R.D. Laing, a sequence that he did many years ago. And but generally speaking, no, I think my brain's been too fragmented during the lockdown to really write focused in a way that I wrote a lot of poems in 2019, like over 100. As I was reading more, I was getting more ideas and inspiration, because I think the best inspiration you can ever get is reading other people's poetry. You don't copy them. Sometimes a word or an image flashes and it brings you into another memory area of the subconscious, and next you know you're away with something. Other poets' work is a constant source of inspiration for me in actually activating and triggering visual imagery to work around, or a word or a few words. And so 2019 was highly productive, the most productive year I've ever written. I'm still sorting out all that stuff. 2020 was dismal, really. That's the truth.
Yeah.
I like one or two things that I did write, and I've had a few of them published, but generally speaking, it was low in quantity.
I had the same experience. It was only when I was doing really structured stuff, like we did NAPO, National Poetry Writing Month, NaPoWriMo projects, and it was only when I had a deadline and the rest of the team going, you need to write something. That was the only time where I wrote anything. But I have a post-it on my wall that's very sort of pithy and cliche, but it says, you can't write with an empty pen. And that's just what I felt all through 2020. I went, well, the input isn't coming in, or what's coming in is fragmented, as you say, and kind of terrifying. So there wasn't a lot going out. But well, that's an absolutely terrible segue into asking you to read one of your own poems.
I wasn't sure whether to read the prose poem. It's a longer piece from the middle of a sentence, or a lighter piece that I wrote about poets performing. But since it's since you're associated with performing and poetry, I'll maybe read the shorter throwaway piece, if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. Hey.
A lot of the stuff I write isn't really for reading out loud, and I haven't read a poem of my own out loud for a long time, actually. I've forgotten. I'll need to get my glasses. I can't remember them. Anyway, this is a new piece.
Oh, wonderful.
It's called Words of Advice to a Discerning Poetry Audience. The poet arrives, fashionably late. His hair is a mess. He's drunk. As he fumbles with sheafs of blank verse, be patient. If he says something like, I'd like to read this one because, listen carefully to the because, and relax. It'll soon be over. He clears his throat. If he's passionate and sharp and attacks corporate crimes, if he lashes out our carps, and if he does it in rhyme, if he sings of old struggles and bright socialist stars, if he pleads for humanity and an end to all wars, don't encourage the cunt. That's where my mind's been in the lockdown.
That's amazing. Oh, it's great because obviously I'm not looking directly at Kevin here. This is magic of filmmaking. So sometimes it can be hard to tell when a piece is finished. Oh, that's brilliant. I know that shouldn't make me miss open mics, but it really did.
I'm not a performance poet. But occasionally you write stuff that you just kind of, you want to read it out because it's not there for sitting on a page.
100%. I love the sort of the rhythm and the rhyme in that one. I just can't wait to get back to open mics where, as you say, I wrote this one because, or I want to share this one because, or, the very worst one, I wrote this on the way here. It's always a sex poem when they say that, which is always vaguely concerning. But in any case,
don't explain.
Yeah, never explain. But yeah, thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing that piece. And to everyone who is watching and listening to the Loudcast, you can catch another one of Kevin Williamson's fantastic poems on the Loudcast Extra. So once we wrap this up, we are going to record that. That is just for our Patreon supporters. So you can hop on over to patreon.com/outwith /IamLoud to check that out. You can sign up for as little as £1 a month, and you get all sorts of fabulous perks if you do that, and you get to listen to all of our past episodes of the Loudcast Extra. So very good deals. Kevin, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. As I was saying earlier, we will have links to everything that you talked about down below. Is the best place for people to find you on your Twitter? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do Facebook or Instagram or any of these things. I sit on Twitter every day.
Yep.
Not all day, just every day. I've reined it back from all day to like just now and again, you know.
Yeah, it can be dangerously addictive, Twitter can, but fabulous. So yeah, we'll put a link to your Twitter handle below in case people are interested in following, and Reekie, Push the Boat Out, and all of that other fantastic stuff. But yeah, thank you again for coming on the show. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode,
thanks for having
consider... Oh, it's honestly, it's such an honor, and obviously, yeah, I hope that Kevin McLean gets well soon, but this has been a blast.
Get well soon, Kev.
Get well soon. And the best way to help Kev be happy is to like this episode and give us a wee subscribe, because Kev loves watching the analytics. But in any case, yes, thank you so much, Kevin, for being on the show, and we will catch up with you soon on the Loudcast Extra. Time to say goodbye. Bye, Kev.
Bye, Katie. See you soon.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, we'd appreciate it if you could hit the like button, if you could hit the subscribe button, and make sure to ring that bell icon so you don't miss any updates from us in the future. If you want to go that extra mile and support us a little further, we do have a Patreon channel with loads of exclusive goodies, and you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. We appreciate your help, guys, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.